This is the California Liberty Project podcast.
So welcome back to the California Liberty Project podcast. As usual, thank you all for being here. And we've got a great guest segment here today with Steve Deace of the Steve Deace Show on The Blaze. You've all seen him, or you all should have. His show is also on YouTube, lots of different channels. He's a very busy man, has been the executive producer of the Nefarious movie, has authored a couple of best-selling books about the COVID debacle and about Fauci, and one is called The Rise of the Fourth Reich. You definitely need to check out his work. And also now a budding children's author of, I believe, 2 books in that series. The latest one was Why Easter. So we're a few weeks late with this interview, but nonetheless, I'm really glad to have Steve Deace on our California Liberty Project podcast. Steve, thank you very much, and welcome to the podcast.
You bet, brother. Thank you for having me. I
really appreciate your time. So we've got just a little bit of time with Steve today. As aforementioned, he's a very busy man. We appreciate his time. I've got a few questions teed up. You know, we're coming from a California perspective. A lot of libertarians in my audience, a lot of kind of probably Rand Paul, a lot of Thomas Massey's, and then also some MAGA folks, I think, out here. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of us. We have more conservatives, more right-leaning folks here in California than any other state in the nation, as you know. And so people don't know that. We're a very, very diverse state politically, right? I'm coming from flyover country, California. Let me tee this up for you. In general, though, if we zoom back out, there's been a lot of talk lately on a lot of the big channels about supernatural, preternatural, demonic activity in the realm of politics, in the realm of the culture. I know on your show, of which I listen to regularly, there's a lot of discussion about this. And I don't think you guys are just doing it as a rhetorical device, right? But even Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson a few days ago, they're talking about things flying around in the sky. Everyone is starting to get more and more keyed in on this. I think there's some cynicism about it, and I think some people really believe it. And my question is, with all the discussions of cessationists and then dispensationalism, the state of Israel, all these things that you too have discussed, and I'm fascinating with this conversation. Let me ask you for your thoughts here on our podcast. To what extent do you think all these battles and all these letdowns and all the incompetence and or corruption, to what extent is that just regular old human being foibles and greed and incompetence and cynicism? Or are we really dealing with a renewed demonic realm, a renewed preternatural element in the politics? And certainly look at our culture, Steve, as you know too well. Tell me your thoughts on that, and I'll let you riff on that topic.
Well, I love the way you frame that question because I think these are important distinctions. And, it's a little bit like arguing about the lesser of two evils. There's no such thing as the lesser of two evils because everything is the lesser of two evils. No one is good but God. Okay, so there's always somebody who is a better person than you, who's less evil than you. I mean, every choice we make is the lesser of two evils, and so therefore it doesn't exist. It's a fallacy. Similarly, if we make everything demonic, then nothing is. All right, we suddenly come up with excuses for our own sinfulness. For example, we also remove the possibility. You want to blaspheme the Holy Spirit. You don't want to take, for example, the possibility of a just divine judgment and say, well, that's demonic. When that's a way for you to not accept accountability for your own actions and the role that you are playing. And so maybe I don't repent of what prompted this. Okay. So let's look at maybe all three of those things and how, and I'm not a theologian, man. Okay. I'm a guy that's just read a lot of theologians. Sure. Okay.
Right.
But let me give you my best learned layman distinction of those three things. Okay. The natural human instinct to sin is to exploit the drives, desires, ambitions that God naturally places in us. Okay. And so for example, we are made God makes Adam and Eve in his image. He made them male and female in his image, the scriptures say, right? And then Adam and Eve, the first temptation, so they're made in the image of God. They are the imago Dei. And since they have not yet sinned, they have a pure connection with God. They are in perfect communion with God in their natural state. Okay? The enemy comes to them and says, there's still something God has denied you. He has held out from you. All right? Some secret knowledge, special knowledge that if you commit this act of disobedience, you'll see why God hid this from you, and he can't be trusted. All right? And so it is, I'm created in God's image. I've been given dominion over the earth. All right. It is a natural instinct now for me want to act on that. And so what does the devil play to? The vanity of that. Exploit it. Take it. I mean, God gives them one rule. I made all of creation for you, but this one thing I reserved for me. Do not eat of it. Okay. And so the exploitation of the natural ways we are made is what sin is. When we break free of that which God has ordained and put in the right context, when we break free of that and act on it in the ways we want to, that's what's called sin. And we all have that desire and instinct within us. Okay, what I would call demonic is actually when we now deny the way we are made. We're nihilists now. We're not seeking to exploit it. We're ingrates. We deny it. All right. And these are things that, I mean, you can look and see why people would be tempted to sin. There's at least east of Eden in a fallen world, there is some instant reward, an orgasm, a check. Okay. There's an instant gratification for sin. Okay. And so there's an instant gratification for saying, like the devil, I will be my own God. I will ascend. I'll be like the Most High. I'll determine what's right for me. What's demonic is nihilistic. It's not exploitive as much as it is degenerate. It is to deny those instincts now. And so I'll give you a very blunt parallel. We go from sin is I come home from work early and I stumble upon my teenage son, having sex with his girlfriend in my home outside of marriage. That's sin. They have a natural instinct to mate. They have a natural instinct to come together. They have a natural attraction. All those hormones are raging, and they break through the guardrails that God has placed on that desire and instinct and exploit it to their own satisfaction, right? That's a sin, right?
Right.
Here's what's demonic. My son now will not even ask a girl out. My son won't leave the basement. My son doesn't want to put up with rejection. He'd rather just masturbate to what's on the internet, get an instant release, not have to take care of a woman, not have to act on those things. He's denying those desires now. You see the distinction I'm drawing? This is a very important distinction, I think. All right. And so the old culture war was how much sin should we allow? Okay. And if you were a liberal or a libertarian, you largely started from the same premise, actually, which is if adults are consenting to something that doesn't bring an immediate harm to a third party, there's no place for government to be involved. Okay?
Right. It's like an enlightenment idea.
Yes.
Right.
If you're a conservative, then you would have said, well, actually, the God where our rights come from determines what rights we actually have and don't have. And so there is something that binds our conscience just beyond consent or a contract with another human being. Okay. And that was the old culture war. What was that tug of war between those two impulses? But both sides agreed that you had agency. Both sides, left and right, libertarians in the middle, agreed you had some form of autonomy. Both sides agreed with this. The new culture war is now that I actually don't want to acknowledge the way that I was made. I want to reject it. So it's no more, when you and I were growing up, Gordon Gekko told us greed was good, right? The new culture, and it's not, but that was the old culture war. So Gordon Gekko wants to exploit the natural desire to capitalize on his God-given talents that his creator put in his heart. Okay?
To be productive.
Yep. He wants to exploit them, though, to disastrous lengths, okay? The new culture war is, I'm not going to even become an entrepreneur at all. I'm not going. I'm the servant at the end of the parable of the talents. Yes, you're a wicked, vicious taskmaster, and I didn't want to fail, so I took what you gave me and I buried it. And what does the master say to that servant? You are a wicked, evil servant. Okay, depart from me. Right? That's demonic. to essentially flip the bird, okay, at our Creator and say, I'm not what you made me. I'm something else. Okay. And I'm an ingrate. I'm not a rebellious child. I'm an ingrate. I'm denying my heritage now. Okay. And then when you get into and then you just have what you mentioned, normal political corruption that's always existed. Okay. But when you start seeing things that don't benefit anybody, you're like, who the hell benefits from a bunch of from the next generation castrating themselves and making it not possible to have a period or an orgasm again for the rest of their lives? We're not even going to perpetuate ourselves. No one is benefiting from that. The only people benefiting from that are in the demonic realm who hate us more than anything. All right. And then we have to account for divine judgment. Okay. And I would say divine judgment comes in when it looks like we're doing our best to do the right thing and in an earthly sense, but it is still not changing things. And so I think of the culture of Jeremiah's time, where the prophet said, you guys are under judgment. Nebuchadnezzar is coming. And they said, no, we've got the temple. We've got this nationalistic pride. We're still the special people. God will not judge us. Okay. And so they rebel against Nebuchadnezzar, fail. Okay. Because Nebuchadnezzar is an instrument of God's judgment. And so when it seems as if that God is not immediately rewarding what appear to be, to us, to our best earthly understanding, righteous acts or inclinations, then it's a little bit like the analogy I would draw is when you punish your own children and they deserve punishment for what they did. But then before you can punish them, or as you're about to punish them, ground them, spank them, put them in timeout, whatever, they're like, oh, hey, I mowed the lawn. Oh, hey, I put this stuff away for mom. Oh, hey, I helped my little brother with his homework. Here's the good things I did so that you don't punish me. As a father, you're like, no, that bad act you did must be disciplined. You see the analogy I'm drawing? Okay.
Right.
So I think we have to make room for divine judgment. If it feels as if our efforts, it's not that they're taking longer than we think. They're just totally falling flat, because the Lord says, my word will not return void. All right. So if it seems as if even righteous things gain nothing, then I think we should consider that we're under judgment and we're at a period in time where systemic repentance matters more than systemic social action. Okay. That God wants to see more people on their knees, beating their fist against their chest, saying, I have sinned. Then he wants to see kind of our get out the vote plan. Okay. When it's demonic, it's when it goes against the way we were made and programmed and denies the way that God made us. And when it's sin, it's when we choose to exploit the way God made us. That's the best way I would draw distinctions between the areas that you pointed out in your very important question there.
Yeah, that's a great response. And it actually feeds in beautifully, ties in very nicely to kind of my second general question of tying in to some extent the spiritual with the political. So beautiful tie in there. I like it. Let me launch kind of the second question at you there, Steve. I'm a fellow Christian. I'm a Catholic, just like Todd Erzin. And in our faith tradition, we rely a ton upon the teachings of Thomas Aquinas, great philosopher, one of the greatest of all time in our belief, who basically took Aristotelian teachings and brought them into the church. Reasons, syllogisms, what makes a thing good is what we say. For example, what makes a pencil good? A good pencil is that tool that performs the task that its creator designed it to do. This fits beautifully in with our shared Christian heritage. What makes a human being good? If we're doing the tasks for which our creator created us to do, right? And so my question, to tie it back into the spiritual with the political, we have this discussion all the time. I know you talk about, the pleated khaki Christians, the Mike Pences out there, the Speaker Johnsons, who are good men. And it's almost like they're directly trying to mingle Christian faith with being soft, or with being, charity. Like, let me give out your tax dollars to perform charity. Let me give your money, your 60 billion to Ukraine, or however many billions to Israel. And so let me be merciful. Let me be charitable with other people's money. Let me completely intermingle the political with with the moral, so to speak, or the spiritual to a certain extent. And my question is, do you believe that these two realms, the political and essentially the spiritual or the religious, should they be more separated, as in a good government or a good governor, a good politician is that person or that institution which does what the Constitution provided them to do, assuming that that is just from the get-go, providing protection for life, liberty, and property. Is that a proper way to look at good governance, a good governor, a good Speaker of the House? Or should a good Speaker of the House who's Christian be bringing in the Bible and basically just be intermingling biblical charity, kind of pretending that the taxpayers should be funding and providing charity for people all around the world? I'm against abortion. You're against abortion. If you may permit me one more example. People criticize federalism, as far as a national abortion ban. But my thing is, I'm 100% pro-life. But does that mean government should be used to do good and export good around the world? For example, to North Korea and to China. Well, we can say, we have to outlaw abortion in North Korea and China, but we don't have any dominion. There's no jurisdiction. If you see kind of where I'm headed
Sure.
with this.
Yeah.
So I know I threw a lot at you there, but I'll shut up now. I want to hear your thoughts on how much separation should there be, or some might call it secularization, or should we intermingle our Christian beliefs with charity, with giving, with welfare statism, etc.? What are your thoughts on that general topic?
Let me first address your pencil argument, because it ties into what I just said a minute ago.
Yes.
Just as a very practical
Please.
example. When I sin with a pencil on my own sinful nature is when I'm like, boy, these pencils are great. I want to have all the pencils. I start taking pencils. My pencils are better. Okay. I start, that's where now I want to abuse the pencil's primary purpose. Demonic is like, I wonder what would happen if I stab somebody with this pencil. Okay.
Right.
Someone, I hear a voice telling you should try that and see what happens. Okay. And God's judgment is like, no matter how hard and good we make the pencils, they just won't work the way they're supposed to, because it's very clear that that's not God's priority right now, and we're outside of his will. So I thought that was a great way for me to just go back and put a bow tie on that. As to your question, I think that your question is very good, but it also shows the lack of catechesis in the modern era. So, for example, Christian charity is not, I cannot do evil so good may come. Okay. And so, the proverb says, if someone steals from you because they're hungry, you have empathy for them, but they still must make 4 times restitution for what they took. Meaning, I cannot violate the commandment against coveting or theft.
Sure.
Because I perceive that I have a need and you have more than me. I'm not allowed to do that. Okay?
Right.
When we pass the plate at church, I don't care what denomination you are, if you're not told, hey, go into your neighbor's pocket and take the money out of his and put that in the plate for you. That's called stealing. All right. And so, because these sorts of distinctions have not been drawn, or, the idea of the separation of church and state actually came originally out of the Protestant Reformation. There was John Knox, the reformer, was concerned that what Queen Mary was doing in his native Scotland. All right. So this idea that there are spheres of authority, Augustine saw 2 realms. The reformers took that to 3 spheres. All right. Church, government, family. All right. And within those spheres, they overlap in some areas, but by and large, they're independent of one another to provide authority for the, here on the earth until the return of the Lord. And so if we understood, for example, that no one stole, you're not allowed to steal from somebody else and tithe that money. Right. That's not a legitimate thing. Okay. And so, but I think a lot of people have not been catechized according to some of the distinctions you're drawing. So these things are all getting lumped in. I would argue that every government in human history has been a theocracy. Every single one. It's just a matter of who the theo is and what he, she, or it demands of us. Okay. And so there is you've heard you can't legislate morality. It's the only thing you can legislate. Everything is moral. Every piece of legislation is a moral legislation. It's just a matter of which morality are we going with here. All right. But ultimately, there is no right to murder. Now, do we have, are there there's 11 ways the federal government prosecutes murder. There's many more ways that state and local governments do it. All right. So is there proper jurisdictional authority? Sure. If, like, for example, or might you say, given the current situation on the ground, I'm not sure I'm comfortable giving this government that kind of power. It will be used against me. So, for example, I'm a big advocate of the death penalty because it's biblical. There is no biblical case against the death penalty. Bible's very clearly for the death penalty, New and Old Testament. In fact, Christ stays at the cross. He's flanked by two men being executed, getting the death penalty. And even the one that repents, Jesus does not demand that he be let off the cross to go free. He lets them both suffer the fate of their guilt. Okay.
And he listens to the one say, this is a just punishment for us, essentially.
Yep. And the one that says that, he doesn't say, now that you've repented, you can get away with your crime. He doesn't say that. No, you still owe the civil authority for why you were put up here. Okay. You admitted yourself you're guilty in your repentance. So then, hey, you got the due penalty for what you did. All right. But as much as I am for it morally, biblically, theoretically, practically, am I anxious to give a government that is putting Christians in prison or trying to for praying via the FACE Act? Am I anxious to give the Joe Biden Department of Justice sweeping new authority on assigning the death penalty to people? You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It's a little bit like living under Nero. Yeah, I'm for the death penalty, but do I want Nero, Caligula, Domitian being the ones to determine who gets that or not? Probably not.
Sure.
All right, because it ain't no fun when the rabbit's got the gun. All right. So, do I think ultimately there absolutely should be a national ban on abortion? It's murder. So yeah, murder should be banned. Okay, you can't be alive in one state and dead in another. Do I think?
Can I jump in right there? Constitutional amendment. Can we work for a constitutional amendment and go to the strongest level of legal protection?
Yes,
that
I would be.
Would you support that?
And I would even argue that maybe the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment already have that. No person shall be denied life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That if you just defined an unborn child as a person, you would already have that constitutional protection. But again, reasonable people can disagree about these things within a matter of conscience. All right.
Right.
But if you were to come to me, like, I don't agree at all that the federal government should have no jurisdictional authority as a rule, okay, or as a premise in prosecuting murder. It already does have that. Okay. But if you were to tell me, if we nationalize the abortion issue right now with who is in charge, we're going to get screwed and more babies are going to die. That is a practical argument that I will listen to, because we're in the world, even though we're not of it, we're still in the world. All right. So we often say that one way, but it works the other way too, which is, I'm not of the world, but I'm in it, is the same thing. So, thou shalt not murder is not of this world. It's from above. Okay.
Right.
But in this world, are we like, I'm not so sure we want to have those people who don't know what murder is, don't know what a border is. Are those the people we want to have determine who should and should not be getting capital punishment? Now, that's an argument that I would listen to because of the realities of the world that we live in at the time. Okay. But that's not the same as arguing that as a rule, you have a right to do something that God says is wrong. No, you don't. You never do. The question becomes, how much do we want to use government to prosecute certain things? Okay. Do we want, for example, if I lived in colonial America, I'd be totally fine with blasphemy laws. All 13 colonies were established by some charter of the Christian church. All 13 of them were. The whole culture is predicated on my belief system and worldview. Okay. I'm going to church with many of the same people, that hold every office in my local community. Okay. I've got no problem with blasphemy laws if I lived in another era. In this era, I might be like, well, today's Earth Day. I don't want to celebrate a holiday started by a guy that murdered his girlfriend and composted her remains. Am I a blasphemer now? You see what I'm saying? Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's where we have to acknowledge the realities of the conditions of the culture we're in, in terms of how we apply what we believe, but we never alter what we believe or water down what we believe because of the conditions of the culture we're in. Those are two different things.
Right. Very much so. Yeah. I really appreciate your time and you joining us here. I want to be a person of my word, and you've got a busy schedule. Unless you have time for one last quick question.
3 questions. We'll make it. That'll be a good round number.
Third question.
Yeah.
I appreciate your generosity, Steve. My third question is a pretty simple one. Any quick advice you can give those of us who are right of center, many cases far right of center, and traditionalists and religious folks, just to lump in a broad demographic there, those of us living in blue states, we get a lot of guff, and I'm fine with that. I don't mind getting teased, like, hey, what are you guys doing in California? If I didn't live in California, I'd be saying, what are you doing living in New York, or whatever. Some of us aren't nuts, but we have either elderly grandparents, aging parents, family reasons, businesses, small, yada, 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 right? What advice do you have for those of us right of center who are living in blue states? I talk about this all the time on my podcast. There are practical issues. There are things, should we be going and fighting those small battles locally? Do we go right to the state house, and try to change things, the big thing at the state legislature? And I know Iowa obviously was a little bit blue, has now gone more to the red side. Any advice you have for those of us who are marooned or expats or living in hiding in very, very blue states in the union?
I think from a just purely political strategy standpoint, there's going to need to be some relocation involved. You need to concentrate the assets you have. You want to build as many dissident communities as you can. I've had a chance to visit Chino Hills the last 2 years in a row, where my new buddy Jack Hibbs is the pastor there. Okay, and the most influential institution in Chino Hills, California, is Jack's church.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this local government, city government, almost everything influential in that community comes inside out from his church. Okay. So they've created an oasis where on some level they are living freely, despite what's going on in Sacramento. Okay.
Correct.
And what I would be doing if I were you guys is, if we have to stay here, and I know California is a vast place, man. Like I can drive from Des Moines to Dallas in about the amount of time you're going to drive from San Francisco to San Diego. Okay. So I think for people that don't live in states like California and Texas, you don't really understand how vast the landmass really is. Okay.
And geographically diverse and all that. Yeah.
But as much as possible, you ought to, I would be looking at moving into areas where my view is dominant so I can make it more so. Okay. So if I'm in Southern California, for example, and I've got loved ones or something here, maybe I look at moving to a Chino Hills or someplace like that. Okay. So that my voice now, I'm still in familiar territory. And I understand SoCal is a big place too. But ultimately, as long if you're really spread out, then you're not only wasting your citizenship in a place where your voice can have no real resonance or power, okay? But the opportunity cost counts too, which is what's the cost of you not being in a place where that would be the case, okay?
Correct.
And so, that's where I would be looking at, precinct to precinct, state house district to state house district. I don't know your local breakdowns, if you guys do county boards of supervisors or how that works at a local level. Okay.
We do. Yeah.
Okay. But then I'd be looking at those districts. Okay. So I'm still in Orange County, but am I in the part of the county where if I moved to, or LA County, if I moved to that part of the county, if enough of us move to LA County, can we get one more seat on that county board of supervisors?
Exactly.
I would be having those kinds of very practical, granular conversations. Because if we're spread too thin, then it doesn't matter. Because I can make the case, it's California. You guys have more of everything than anybody does, given your size and population, right?
Right. 39 million people.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think people would be stunned to know Donald Trump got one of his highest vote totals in the nation from California, lost by 20 points. Okay. So I think that ultimately where I'd start getting together on what, let me put it this way. There is no way to do this without some level of suffering. Never. Okay? Mm-hmm. There's no righteousness happens by some level of suffering. There's some form of suck I've got to move. I've got to do something inconvenient. I got to go to school board meetings more. Okay, I got to go to State House more. Nothing good happens without any form of suffering. There's no Resurrection Sunday without a crucifixion on Good Friday. There always must be some suffering. So I would be looking at very practically, strategically, what are the precincts, the areas where we need to concentrate our human resources so that we're almost impenetrable in this community. What Chino Hills is almost to the point that Gavin Newsom would have to send the National Guard or the sheriffs in to physically enforce things, which would be a terrible visual. That's what you're looking for. You're looking to create communities where what they have to do to impose on you sucks worse, okay, than what you have to do to resist them. And when that ratio is turned upside down, that's now when you have agency and power.
You make a great point. I just want to jump in there because in that area, in that general area, not too far from Chino Hills, is where they had, I think it made national news, but Newsom sent his henchman down, Tony Thurmond, the Secretary of Education or whatnot, basically to overturn their parental rights policies that they took over a school board there, exactly as you're saying. Yeah. So I love what you're saying.
I mean,
let's get granular.
In the early years before the revolution, there were parts of colonial America that the Sons of Liberty controlled. And if you were a bureaucrat or a magistrate from the crown, and you didn't want the job of going into that community and trying to enforce this on them, because on a good day you just come out tarred and feathered. Okay,
right.
Like everybody knew I'm not going into Samuel Adams's neighborhood and telling them we're quartering troops, because
you don't go march into the Green Dragon for a beer if you're a
yes. Okay, everybody was like, have that. He's the intern. Send that guy out there. Okay, let him get his ass kicked. Okay,
right.
So we're essentially trying to create those kinds of communities where no one wants the job. Okay, no one wants the job of going into your hood and saying, "Hey, you're going to teach your kids that that castrating themselves is a good thing," because everybody knows how that community is going to react to it. And so you're such a hassle of dealing with, they leave you alone. This is what the Romans did with the Jews. The Jews were the only people in the Roman Empire that had religious freedom. And it's because it was such a pain in the Roman ass to impose the Roman religion on them that the cost was so high, they finally just said, just pay us our tribute, man, and we'll let you have the temple and you can go worship Jehovah and we'll leave you alone. Just pay us the taxes and we'll call it even. That's what you're looking for.
I love that answer because we've seen that. As I mentioned, I think it was Chino Valley. I've had Sonia Shaw. Now she's on Fox News at night. She was a guest on this show. She's great. Took it over. They sent Tony Thurmond, the state superintendent of instruction. They sent him packing. He was like being booed out of the meeting. Exactly as you said.
Yep.
There are places in this state that are so, I don't want to say red. It's not a MAGA thing, but that are so dissident. It is hard, even with the, for example, CCW permits, concealed carry permits. People think, oh, in California, that's commie land. You can't. No, it depends on the county. This goes right back to what you're saying. Granularity, localism, and subsidiarity. These things are at play. So I love your answer. And I think people in California listening to my show, take heart, guys. We can do things. But yeah, there's no forward progress without a little bit of suffering and sweat in the game. Steve, I love that answer, and I thank you very much for your generosity, for your time. Anyone listening, you need to check out Steve's show. It's a great conservative, right of center, just platform. And he and his co-hosts and other folks like Daniel Horowitz, they gave me faith in the conservative movement over the past 3 to 4 years because they were coming hard every day against the regime, speaking the truth about mandates, about the insanity. You got to check out his show. Check out Nefarious, the movie. And Steve, thanks very much for your time and really appreciate it. Hopefully we can do it again in the future at some point. God bless.
God bless you all. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
This has been the California Liberty Project podcast. Make sure to subscribe, share it with others, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter.